This actually is an older tshuva, I think, this tshuva from Rav Moshe. Yeah. There's usually always a date. This is from Choshen Tes Vav. That's from the fifth. It's from the 40s. Is it from the 40s? No, it's from the 50s. 55. Yeah. Okay. Ine mashi yesh beis achin sherotzen lasos davar tov. He says. So first of all, the name of the tshuva is B'davarim Mechola Hafrish Tzedakah Shelo L'Tzorach Achiv. Is a person allowed to set aside his tzedakah money for his brother, Kedei sheyuchal leishev b'shalva achar nisuin, so that he can sit with peace of mind after his wet marriage, V'lilmod Torah ez shanim, and to study Torah for a number of years. So they want to create a classic Yisachar Zevulun relationship, right? So hinei mashi yesh beis achin sherotzim lasus davar tov kasher ba'od shano shnatayim yisa achihem hatzair shalomeid biyeshiva isha. So there's a group of brothers who would like to do something noble, that in another year or two, Yisa achihem, their younger brother, is going to get married. He's learning in yeshiva. I'm sure that he's going to find a shidduch. He's going to get married. And he's going to need a lot of money to support him. And they want this younger brother to continue learning because they see he's so successful in his yeshiva studies. And they want to use their tzedakah money to support him. But they're going to need a large amount of money for that endeavor. So he says that they're going to need a lot of money, to be able to make this happen. Maybe the tzedakah money during the time that he's married will not suffice. So what they want to do is they want to set aside money now to put it into a savings account. They want to take it from their tzedakah money now, this year, when he hasn't even found a girl yet, put it into savings and to put it aside for when he does get married. So that their brother can sit and learn for a number of years after. They wanted to ask my opinion, are they allowed to do this? And now the sort of the background information in halacha that is the basis of this question is the fact that in Shulchan Aruch it says that a brother would take priority over other poor people. He says, but maybe that's only true when the brother's financial needs are real and present at the moment. And that there he would take priority over other poor people. He says, but the problem is that in this case, the brother is not financially needy. He's sitting and learning in yeshiva. The yeshiva is feeding him, I guess, and that's the argument. And there are needy people right now who need to be taken care of. So the question is, maybe that would the needs of the poor right now would take priority over putting aside money for the future of this brother. He says, "V'hinei kishiyesh ani shetzarach hayom la'achila ba'ofen she'eno pikuach nefesh v'karav shelo chaser lo lahayom klum aval tzarchu lemachar." He says, regarding when you have a poor person who's not about to die, in other words, he has enough food for today, but he's going to need food for the long term. He's going to need money for the long term. V'hugam hayom bedin ani, but he has the status of an ani right now. And remember what we learned yesterday or 2 days ago is that what qualifies you as an ani? That you don't have enough money in the bank to support yourself for a year. You don't. So a lot of people would qualify as an ani. But I have food for today. There's food in the cupboard. I'm not going to starve. But I'm allowed to sharashai litol tzedakah she'ein lo masayim zuz. That he's allowed to take tzedakah, as provided he doesn't have 200 zuz, which is the amount that I guess you need for a year. Av she'ein hadin mefurish mashma shetzarach litein lahakarov. He says, even though the law is not explicit, it would seem that as long as he qualifies as an ani, then if one of those poor people is your relative, you have to give them kedima. Shelo matzino shetzarach ledakdek bedin hakedima shel hakrov lomar shu rakashin shavim bahatzarach bein lahazman bein lahanechitzus. He says it doesn't seem like we have to be so meticulous and say that they not only have to be equal in need, but they have to be equal in immediacy of need. We don't find that the Shulchan Aruch says that everything has to be equal in order to provide for a relative first. As long as two people have a right to justify their definition of an ani, such that they can take from the community chest. And this is what we were learning about, like what do you have to do before you can take from the community chest? So you have to sell off all your gratuitous assets, you have to sell off all your non-essentials, and then when you could get down to the bare minimum, if you still don't have enough money to last you for the year, you're allowed to take from the kuppah, from the community tzedakah. As long as a person qualifies, then if one of them is a relative, then it seems from the Shulchan Aruch that you give to the relative, even if the need of the other poor person is far greater. Since the mitzvah for each of them is equally the mitzvah of tzedakah. It also seems, says Rav Moshe, that if you have two poor people and they both qualify as aniyim, you don't have to start making a calculus which one is more needy. Even though we did say that you do have a right to give more to one than the other based upon what your heart tells you is going to be necessary. But Rav Moshe says, but the discretion is still yours. You can give to whichever one you want. Shebesiftes mashma le'in kadimas dekoin v'levi liYisrael shuhurak kishetzorcham shava lefarnes or shava leksus. He says, we did learn in the Shulchan Aruch that there is a concept of kedima, of who takes priority. A Kohen before a Levi before a Yisrael. Remember, we learned in that Sefer Hilchos Tzedakah that today many poskim say that those kedimas don't apply. But he says, but the Shulchan Aruch does point out that those kedimas are only when everything else is equal, that they both need cash, or they both need clothing, or they both need food. Like, it doesn't say in the language of the Shulchan Aruch that you have in front of you many poor people and you don't have enough in your pocket to give to all of them. It says you don't have enough in your pocket to either provide cash or clothing. Lefarnes usually means to provide food or clothing for all of them. So it sounds like that even though the two people in front of you are aniyim, but if one of them needs food and the other one needs clothing, you should give the one who needs food first, because that's a more essential need than clothing, even though the guy who needs the clothing is a Kohen, right? So what it seems from there, says Rav Moshe, that you do at times have to measure or calculate the level of need. He says, V'gam ha Rak b'chacham l'ksus ba'am haaretz le'achayos dehu lefarnes kasav haramah the Talmud Chacham kodem. He says the only time that we give priority to someone whose need is less is when that person of lesser need is a Talmud Chacham. That's what the Ramah says. Aval sha'ar kedimos urakisha terabayu shavin b'hatzarech. He says, but all other, who do you give first questions, is only when the need is equal between the two people. The im ha'yisrael lefarnes v'hakoin l'ksus ha'yisrael lefarnes kodem kamo b'shavin she'isa b'sif zayin shelahachil harav kodem milachasos ha'aron. He says, basically, the Shulchan Aruch always says that feeding someone who's hungry always takes priority over clothing someone who doesn't have enough clothes. That it seems from the Shulchan Aruch that the primary criterion is whose need is greater. And therefore that seems to contradict what I just told you, that as long as two people qualify as aniyim, it's your choice to give to whomever you wish. What am I going to do with this statement of the Shulchan Aruch that whoever's need is greater takes priority? Kasav bisman hazeh she'ein talmidei chachamim afilu inyan litra the dahava kol shkein dein litchos bikuach nefesh mipanav. And the Shach writes, we saw this yesterday in the Sefer, is that nowadays you don't give priority to a Talmud Chacham if the needs of an Am Haaretz are greater. Shemashma shemafarish hada Chacham l'ksus ve'Am Haaretz u'la'achios mamish shemikol makom ksus Talmud Chacham kodem shemkein efsher rak bazeh Yisrael la'achios kodem l'kohen shein litchos pikuach nefesh to Yisrael miksus kohen in kein efsher shel mizonos keshelek chash pikuach nefesh adif afshar kedimos kekohen l'ksus mi Yisrael l'farnes. So it sounds from what the Shach says, that we're only dealing with the case of pikuach nefesh, I think is what he's saying. But when it's not pikuach nefesh, you do apply, let's say, kohen before Yisrael and so forth. Aval pashut, let's see.
During the Holocaust, because let's say you have probably apples or whoever were giving up the food when they were eating meal time. Once they have that broth or soup, they do little chunks of potato. They make sure that the bayim and the Talmud Chacham little chunks of potato more than the other people.
Maybe, I don't know. First of all, I don't know how practical it was in the camps for the Jews themselves to make those decisions. I really don't know what the mitzias, what the actual situation was on the ground. But I have heard of situations where they made sure that the Rebbe, if they knew that he was in the camp, was able to be provided for. But those were individuals who, you have to remember that in the camps, people were just trying to survive. They weren't thinking about necessarily a lot of these halachic issues. But you're right. I mean, it could be that in a pikuach nefesh situation, that the Talmud Chacham would take priority. The Rav Moshe is going into a lot of more technical stuff. So okay. So let me just cut to the chase. So Alma din tovas hana'a sheyesh lo hu zechus shelo litein lechol mishi yirtze me'elu shershan likach matnos kohuna. Kevin shafa asher hu kohen roshai likach yochol litein lo kisherotze av sheyesh kohanim hatzrichim yoser. So he says, basically, he wants to bring a proof from the laws of giving truma to Kohanim. And he basically says that when I give truma to Kohanim, even though there may be a Kohen who's more needy for truma than another Kohen, but it's still my prerogative to give to whomever I wish. So let's say I know a particular Kohen who's done a favor for me, and I want to be able to give him. I don't have to start making a calculus that the other Kohen needs the truma more than this guy does. I'm allowed to give to whomever I wish. He says, the bottom line, therefore, would dictate that for tzedakah as well, you have the benefit of selecting which poor person you would like to give to. Even though there may be a particular poor person who needs the money more, you still have a right to decide which ani is going to receive your tzedakah. And therefore, when you have an individual donor, I think we saw this distinction in the Sefer also yesterday, an individual donor has full discretion to give to whomever he wishes, even when he wants to give to a cause, let's say that's to provide clothing, over a cause that's to provide food. Aval gabai al kis shel tzedakah, she'ein lo bahem v'gam lo lahanosnim zchus tovas hana'ah, he says, but the gabai tzedakah doesn't have the right to say, I've gotten more favors from one guy over another, so I'm going to give the one that I like more. If hey elahu din shel ala kahal lasos behem hatov be'inei Elokim va'adam, but rather the community kupa has to be completely impartial. Has to be completely impartial in deciding who they give to, and can't say, well, we'll give to you because you painted my house, so the Gabbai tzedakah will say, because you painted my house, I'm going to give you more tzedakah. K'de'isa sham v'hagaboim heim hamamunim mehakol alayhu ne'amar dinim lahaktim litein mitchila lahanachutz yoser. He says they have to use the guidelines that are provided in the Shulchan Aruch to give to whichever person is needier. And they have to use the criteria of if one needs food and the other one needs clothing, the one needs food gets priority. They're not allowed to give more to one than the other when the needs are the same, as it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. It says that really the gaboim of tzedakah have to really give out the money in a tribunal, so that to make sure that everything is done judiciously. But he says, and Rashi explains that the reason why you need a tribunal is to preside over it like a beis din, to make sure that they're giving it out correctly. And it seems to me, says Rav Moshe, that it's based on the fact that when you have a community tzedakah set up, that money belongs to the aniyim based on the guidelines of the Shulchan Aruch. And therefore, when there is no greater need of one over the other, you have to divide it equally because it belongs to those poor people. But if you're a private individual and you want to use your tzedakah money, not give it to the local fund, but you want to give it out yourself to specific poor people, you have discretion to give it to whomever you wish. You can even give all of it to one if you want. And therefore, when you have one of them is a relative that comes to you for tzedakah, you should definitely distribute to the karov. The relative takes priority. Im achakorov rashai litol tzedakah. Now the whole din of giving to a relative does not apply to a kupa, does not apply to a community tzedakah. It applies to an individual. So if you have a relative who comes to you who needs tzedakah, you definitely should give him over anyone else, even though the other people's needs are greater. V'lachein, and therefore, keven shezevadai, sha'af adam sheyesh lo masayim zuz, im tzarachu lahasi bito rashai likach litzdaka. He says, and even though a person may have enough provision for a full year, but if he needs to marry off his daughter, he's allowed to take tzedakah. Okay? Now, Rav Moshe is not talking about what kind of wedding you're trying to make. But in principle, if I don't have enough money to marry off my daughter, to provide her with a dowry that is communal standard, and I need to make a wedding, I'm allowed to accept money from the community for tzedakah. Lazeh kevin demi masayim zuz lo yaspik lo lazeh detam masayim zuz mishum shezeh maspik lo l'shana lemizana suchzus. He says because, and that amount is usually it's the Gemara defines it as 200 zuz. That was the amount needed for food and clothing for a year, and that's not going to be enough to cover the needs for the wedding. The gam barur shirashai lekabel al zet tzedakah lo rak keshekavar nishtadcha v'karav lizman achasana ela af bizman kodem. He says, and not only that, but you're allowed to accept money for tzedakah, not only after the shidduch has been made and the wedding is approaching, but you're even allowed to take money from tzedakah in advance, in anticipation that your daughter's about to get engaged. And let's say if you live in a community where in order to be able to make a shidduch, you have to commit to a certain amount of money, then you would be allowed to take tzedakah at that time as well. He says, and let's say you have a yeshiva bacher who wants to get married at some point in the future, and he's committed himself to learn Torah for a number of years. So he's put aside his ability to make parnasa, and he knows he's going to need to get married at some point while he's learning in yeshiva. He says the rabbis permit us to do that. If a young man wants to be able to dedicate his life to Torah study, and he knows he's going to thereby be reliant on taking tzedakah in order to be able to get married, he's permitted to do so. And that's true even if he's perfectly healthy and capable of getting a job. He still has a right to say, I'm at a stage of my life that if I don't learn now, I'll never be able to do so. So I will put myself in a situation where I'm not able to make an income, and I'm going to accept from the community chest or from individuals to enable me to learn. In other words, the bottom line is, it is permitted to take tzedakah money to sit and learn, is what Rav Moshe is essentially saying. You're right. I mean, the parents, well, first of all, what if the parents don't appreciate the value in their son sitting and learning? They feel that the son should go out and get a job. He says, Mom and Dad, I want to be able to sit and learn. And they say, well, it's on your coin. You're off your OTP. You're off the payroll, right? And you do whatever you want with your life. We're not supporting it. So such a young man does have a right to say, I'm going to rely on tzedakah funds, and he can actually go to individuals. Perhaps he's a Baal Tshuva, and he doesn't have parents who appreciate what he's doing. He's allowed to accept tzedakah. Now, there's a lot to be filled in between the lines over here. There's a lot to fill in between the lines. What if the guy is, he has to make an assessment and perhaps sit down with his Rebbe and come to a decision. Am I going to see real hatzlacha? Am I going to see real success in my learning? Or is this a vanity project? In other words, there are some guys who are not going to be the next Gadol Hador. And if they're not going to be the next Gadol Hador, and they just want to sit and learn because they enjoy this endeavor, they'd like to enrich themselves in Torah study, that's one sort of level. There's another level where a person says, I feel that by enriching myself in Torah study, I'm going to be able to be a major contributor to the Jewish people in some significant way, either because I'll become a rabbi or because I'll go into business later, but I'll be able to be an educated balabas who will be able to give the daf yomi to my colleagues and so forth. In other words, I do believe that you have to be able to justify taking from tzedakah, not just because you want to be able to learn a little bit longer, but because you're going to be able to do something to help Klal Yisrael at some point afterwards. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I do feel I think you're right, Moshe. I think that the general zeitgeist after the Shoah was that we have to emphasize the importance of Torah study because, especially in America, things were very, very schwach. Things were very, very weak. But Rav Moshe is citing from the Shulchan Aruch that even if a young man is perfectly healthy and capable of earning his own way through life, he's allowed to accept money for tzedakah if he wants to be able to continue learning Torah. Yeah, of course, there's a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. No. So hold on a second. We're talking about the individual person, the yeshiva bacher. The yeshiva bacher is allowed to make this calculus and say, I know that I could, if I went to work, I'd be able to support myself. But I have decided that I would like to sit and learn for, let's say, 5 years instead. I will therefore make myself a ward of the community and take tzedakah. Now, as far as the individual donors to whom he's going, if he's not going to a general kuppah, he's going to individual donors, then the individual donors can make that call, right? And can decide whether this young man is a worthy project, you know. But in any event, Va'ain b'shach, he says, Shirashai gam kodem shenasa shadain ein lo hatzarech, the kabel tzedakah b'shvil hatzarech shilo acher nisuin. And therefore, a young man in such a situation even has a right to accept tzedakah donations from people to enable him to get married, even before he started dating, you know, even before he started the whole process. But he says, I know I'm going to need a certain amount, and that's perfectly legal. Umemela. Okay, so you know what? We'll finish this. Mirz Hashem tomorrow. I hope to be able to finish this. To get back to our original question, do the brothers have a right to set aside money in advance to put it into savings so that their brother can sit and learn for a few years? And that would be at the expense of other people getting tzedakah. So we'll hold it here for today, and we'll conclude Bezras Hashem tomorrow.